My name is Seth Bloom. I'm Senior Director of Attorney Services at LevelSet here in New Orleans. We're putting on a lot of webinars these days, trying to get people as much information as they can, especially during these times of uncertainty with COVID. You can always, if you have any questions during this webinar, please post questions and Aaron can answer them. And if we're not able to get to your questions, then you can post them on the Expert Center or ask Aaron directly. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Don't be bashful. Please ask questions. So we're really excited today to have Aaron Cartwright from Arlington, Texas, who practices in that greater area, give us a webinar on building your case. So Aaron, thanks so much for hosting this webinar today. We look forward to a great presentation.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me all right? Sound okay?
Everything sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, so first, I would like to thank LevelSet for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to educate anyone whenever I'm given the opportunity. I think that, the more education people have, the more likely they are to succeed. And I absolutely 100% need all of y'all to succeed for selfish reasons, very selfish reasons. But today's presentation is going to be basically how to protect yourself, because a lot of the questions that I get from my contractors, I'll introduce myself here in a second, but a lot of the questions that I get from new contractors, from contractors that are, experiencing the litigious nature of Americans involves, well, how can I protect myself in the event that something stupid happens? Well, here we are. So I am a business securities and construction attorney. I do primarily litigation, construction litigation specifically. I represent mostly contractors, but I have represented property owners. I file liens, I enforce breach of contracts. Basically, I sue people and I defend people who get sued. It's what I do and I enjoy every second of it. But being where I am, I see a lot of the same problems over and over and over again. And while they're fixable during the litigation, it actually would help make your life easier, my life easier, and the end result, the cost, far cheaper if there were just a couple of things that we could do up front. Okay, and that is where this presentation comes in. So, there are going to be 4 topics today that are covered. The first one is going to be why this area is important, which we've already kind of gone over a little bit. But then we're going to cover what happens at the beginning of a relationship between a contractor and a property owner, or between a subcontractor and a general contractor. We're going to go through some of the stuff that happens during the course of construction, during the course of a build, during the course of a project. Things that you should be doing to protect yourself, things that you can be doing to just make sure that the project runs smoothly from your end as well. And then at the end, we'll go through some of the things that are important on final walkthrough and punch list. Okay. So I also believe that there's going to be a bonus section in here, but I'll leave that as a surprise for everyone. And feel free to ask questions. I do have some spots every so often where we're just going to take a quick break or a quick break for questions. Okay. So why is this important? The reason that this is important is because lien enforcement and litigation are stories. As a trial attorney, it is my job to tell your side of the story in the best, most convincing way to a judge and a jury. A judge and a jury are people. They're people just like, you and I, you pick a jury of your peers. It's 12 random people that sit in a jury box and make a decision on their case. Well, there have been all sorts of studies done that show that people connect most with a story. And so whenever you are talking to them, whenever I am talking to them, whenever I'm presenting your case, I'm not just presenting facts and figures using, the terms and the lingo and everything else, because that overwhelms people. People's eyes just glaze over. Okay. So what I am presenting is a story. And right here, you see a timeline that I usually do at the very beginning of any litigation that I start. Okay. And what this does is it kind of shows you how I walk through things from a very visual perspective. Okay. So at the beginning, we've got the contract. For sake of argument, I put this on January 1st, 2020. After your contract, you usually mobilize. You go grab your first set of materials, you grab your labor, you put everybody on the project and you start. Okay. There's usually some people will ask for a mobilization or, 25% upfront, the down payment, so on and so forth. It's not a really big deal, but some people will do it. That's why it's in green. Okay. After that, there's work done. Usually there's a payment if the project goes long enough. More work, more payment. Project keeps going. There's a change order somewhere in there. If you've got, a particularly difficult setup, then, there'll be multiple change orders throughout the life of this. But I had to keep this one simple today. Okay. So after your change orders, you've got more work that's being done. You've got final walkthrough and you've got punch list. Okay. We're not going to go into the specifics. We're going to keep this one simple, but that's the general overview. All right. So here at the very beginning, you've got three things that, in my opinion, you should be paying attention to and that you should take good care that you are noting properly. Okay. The first one is, the contract. So the contract itself, you should always have a contract. And the reason that you should have a contract is because it is the first and best defense that you have against somebody saying that you did do something or you didn't do something that you were not supposed to. Okay. It provides clarity. It tells people, who are the parties that are going to be here, what exactly is being done, where the project is going to be taking place, exactly how long the project is supposed to take, or a reasonable expectation of how long the project is supposed to take, so on and so forth. But the primary takeaway from this should be that it provides clarity to everyone about the scope of work. You need that clarity.
I just wanted to say something because I see you have that nice icon of a handshake. So you're not suggesting anyone just do business with a handshake, are you?
So I have had people who frequently tell me that the way they do business is with a handshake. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I have a vested interest in people not doing business with handshake agreements. I think that it's a bad business practice nowadays, but there was a point in time where, the handshake was just what it was. People valued and I'm not saying that people don't anymore, but there was a time when people valued their word a little bit more. In my experience, America in general has become just a lot more litigious. People are a lot more likely to say, oh, well, you damaged this, or this wasn't done, or I asked you for this and you didn't provide it. Like it wasn't, but I have a vested interest in that one. So handshake agreements, I'm not so much, even though, do note, oral agreements are enforceable in Texas. All right. But the other reason for the contract has to do with that handshake agreement versus not, and that is lien perfection. Okay. So when you have a written contract, it makes my life easy to enforce your lien, because a written contract, you need a signature by the person holding an interest in the property. Okay. In certain situations, it's one person, one property owner, until you go into a multi-owner situation and you need to perfect a lien. Your lien can only be perfected against the person whose signature, against the interest of the person whose signature that you have. Let me just give you an example. Okay. So let's say that you're going into business with or you're a contractor, you're going to do business with a house flipper. Well, the house flipper, they didn't register their entity, so it's two people. Let's just go ahead and call them husband and wife. Husband and wife decide that they're going to get into house flipping, right? Well, wife is going to manage the company from the back office. Husband's going to be going out, doing the projects, the front side, managing the contractors, so on and so forth. You show up with your contract to the site, only the husband's there. So you get the husband to sign it. You go ahead and do the work. At the end of the day, they don't pay. Okay. Well, now you have one contract, excellent job, and you have one signature on that contract. Good job, but not perfect. Because what you didn't know was that behind the scenes, the husband and wife had decided that they weren't going to bother registering their entity. And so whenever they bought the property, it's in the name of the husband and wife. Now, even though it's a commercial property, maybe, you have two separate interests, okay? You have the husband's interest and you have the wife's interest, and they have an undivided right to that property. Well, when you place your lien, you can only place it against the husband's interest. And when you do that, that means that you can't foreclose. And ordinarily, commercial properties are a lot easier to foreclose on, okay? So you can just, shut those down and sell them all for your piece if you don't get paid. But in this situation, without a signature by both parties, you only have the husband's interest, and therefore you can't foreclose on it. So the only thing we're left with is breach of contract action with causes of action for promissory estoppel, quantum merit, a bunch of other wonderful legal jargon, which we won't get into. So that's why you need a signature by all parties. Okay, so either corporate representative or both husband and wife or everybody that's living there that, would own the property. You can check the Central Appraisal District records if you want to get into that. But other than that, it's just who owns the property. Make sure that they sign it. The next thing that you need to be looking at are initial pictures. The best contractors I have worked with were the ones that went into a job site, and as they were doing their initial walkthrough or before any of their guys ever stepped foot in there, they took pictures of the work area before anybody had done anything. And the reason that's important is because you don't need to walk into a spot where there's already busted woodwork, busted wall work, busted machinery, and then you don't take pictures, you walk out, and now somebody's trying to claim that you busted up, their woodwork, their machinery, something that was on the property, and you're like, but I didn't. And how are you going to prove that? So the best contractors, like I said, that I've worked with have been people that took pictures of everything right before they started, just so that they had kind of a, this is our entry picture, so on and so forth. But here's a good place for questions. Any questions so far?
I don't think we have any right now. It looks like we've got a quiet audience today, but I'm sure we can get them going in a few minutes. I know some will pop up.
I don't know.
Actually, Aaron, to your point, my brother-in-law is a contractor, and you'd think a contractor needs to really always be on site, but they do such a good job at taking photos before and then having their supers go through and take pictures during it. It's amazing how some of these new platforms can really watch the progress go.
Absolutely. There are several of them out there that will keep track of the pictures for you. I don't know how much those cost, but no, they're super useful if it's a routine part of your business. But all right, let's go ahead and move to kind of the middle section as work itself is being done. All right. Don't pay too much attention to this, but kind of do, because the pictures are out of order. Okay. And so I might have to flip back and forth between these next two slides. All right. So the first thing that you're going to be looking for, this is of primary importance, are payments over here and lien waivers. Okay. Obviously, you're doing work so that you can get paid. Understand that your liens have to be done for each invoice that has been submitted and not paid on. Okay. Consider it getting multiple bites at the apple. Okay. So you've got a project, you're on this project for 2 months, you're supposed to be getting 3 payments during those 2 months, all right, every other week, okay, plus your initialization, right? Well, you go in and you do the first month's worth of work, you submit 2 invoices for it, right? Well, those invoices haven't been paid 30 days later, but you're continuing to do work on the project, okay? Now, you do have some time to discuss, or you do have some time to send out pre-lien notices or whatnot, but what you need to do is realize that each lien, or your lien rights, extend to each invoice. And so if you let a payment requested in January slip all the way out to April, even though you were on the project until March, then you've got a problem. Okay, so you've lost the right to lien on the amount that that invoice covers. That is very important. So just pay attention to that. All right. The other thing that we're going to discuss here is the middle picture. And this was my fault for not organizing this the way I kind of should have beforehand. But there are 4 types of lien waivers. Okay. Those 4 types of lien waivers can be divided up quite quickly. They are conditional and unconditional on progress and final. Okay. So you've got conditional on progress payment and unconditional on progress payment, and then you've got conditional on final payment and unconditional on final payment. And what this means is very simple. So the real words, well, we're not going to go with the real words, but basically you need to just pay attention to conditional and progress. Conditional means that you go to the job site, the general contractor's there, the property owner's there, they hand you a check and they want a lien waiver. Okay. If they hand you a check and they want a lien waiver, you hand them a conditional lien waiver on progress payment. And the reason for that is that means that you have been paid, but as of the time that you sent the lien waiver over, or the time that you signed the lien waiver, the check had not cleared. Okay, meaning that it's conditional because when it does clear, that means that you no longer have rights to lien because you've been paid. Okay. But in the event that they stop the check bounces or something like that, your lien rights are still preserved. Okay. The next one is unconditional on progress payment. You go to the job site, the GC or the property owner hands you a cashier's check, which are, readily available funds, guaranteed or certified funds, or they hand you cash, however you want to, get paid. Okay. Unconditional means that you've been paid enough. You can basically take that money, go out to the grocery store and buy groceries with it. All right. You can pay your guys right there, however it is that you want to do it. But it means that you recognize that you have been paid at the same time or the money is good at the same time the lien waiver is signed. Okay. There are certain circumstances in which people will say, well, we want, an unconditional lien waiver on final payment. Like, no, if I haven't been paid, if you haven't been paid, if the check hasn't gone through, if it's not the full amount, you're not getting an unconditional lien waiver on final payment. You're just not. And it's not a requirement by law that you have to have that unconditional final payment before you get your check from the general contractor, the property owner. So people will try and, scare you into signing those things. Don't be scared. The next part that we're going to go through, pictures. Pictures are going to be a running theme throughout this. Okay. So I was answering a question by a gentleman on a Facebook group yesterday, I think it was, and it's absolutely perfect for this presentation. What he was saying is that he would go and he would do work, but then when he came back the next day, parts of the work would be damaged. And there would have been multiple contractors out there, multiple subcontractors. And then, he wasn't responsible for it, but the general contractor, the property owner, made him responsible for it because they're like, look, you damaged this and we wanted it in perfect condition. Here's the deal. If you're taking pictures as your progress is going along, you can show the owner where you walked off the job site, on a Monday, you came back on a Tuesday and your, stuff was busted up, right? But when you walked off the job site on Monday, it was perfectly clean. Everything was hanging exactly where you left it. The job site was clean. The paint was in order. Everything was clean. You can show him that in a picture. And then what's he going to do? Say, well, you came in early and destroyed it yourself. What? That doesn't make sense. Pictures are very important. They show your side of the story. Whenever you are in court, you are showing your side of the story. People want to know what happened. People want to be able to connect with it. And in order to do that, one of the best ways to do it is through pictures. Take the pictures. Just do it.
Aaron,
all right.
Aaron, we do have a question from Lisa.
Awesome. Lisa, what can I do you for?
Lisa asks, for projects that are bank funded, the bank always requires that I sign a unconditional lien waiver prior to getting the final paid. I've tried to refuse and explain why with no luck. Any thoughts?
Yes. Consider who is asking you that question. Okay. It's a bank. Technically, it's a bank asking you that question, but the bank itself has set down a policy for everyone to follow. Okay. And it's really simple to tell 500 employees, just get the unconditional final lien waiver on final payment, right? Before you hand over a check. Okay. That's what the policy is, because the property code is real confusing on some of this stuff. Okay. That's their policy. The person who's executing that policy is an employee. Okay. They're working for somebody else. That's their job. They're not the ones doing the work. They're not the one researching the law. They're not the one executing on this. They're just the one saying bank policy says that I can get this from you. In that situation, I would say that it's all right to go ahead and do it. Okay. Now, the reason I say this is because an unconditional final lien waiver that's executed and then a check is given to you that later bounces or somebody decides that they're not going to pay, I can still enforce your lien rights on that, because the lien's invalid, or the lien waiver is invalid if you weren't paid. That just makes the scenario a lot more complex. The easy way to do it is to give them the right lien waiver. The fast way to do it is to get them the one that they want. The right way to do it is definitely to get them the one that they're actually needing. Did I say that right? Basically saying easy, fast, and cheap, you can only have two. Sorry. But in that case, I would also just sue the bank. Like if I'm enforcing that and they either don't pay you or they decide to stop the check for work that you've already done and submitted a lien waiver for, I'm bringing the bank in. And they don't like being sued, so they tend to pay up. So the next part, change orders. Change orders are a big concern because a lot of the times what I find is that people will, while they're on the job's moving quick. They've got 100 million moving parts going at the same time. Everything's, firing on all cylinders. So when somebody walks in and says, hey, I need this change, you agree to it, you set a price to it, and then you keep moving, right? You maybe write it down somewhere. I need you to do me one tiny, tiny favor. When you're standing next to that person, send them a text message. Okay, so if they're saying, hey, we've decided that we want the paint in the living room to go from blue to red. You're like, okay, I have blue paint on site already. It's going to take me a day to get the red paint in here. We're going to have to charge you, $30 or $40 extra or however much, and we're going to be delayed by a day because we had originally thought that this would only take, we'd be done by Monday, but it's going to take us till the end of Wednesday. Okay. Send that in a brief text message while you're standing there next to them and get that, just have them send back a yes. I can do so much more with that than I can do with absolutely nothing because it comes into a, well, he said, well, she said. Nobody likes that. The judges like to see what's in the contract, what's written. Okay. Obviously, I'll stay with the change order slide here. But obviously my preferred practice of doing it whenever I have people in my office and I'm, helping them set up their shop, I will provide them with a change order form. Okay. Just a little blank change order form with, room to put everything, the date, lines for expected delay, any additional payment, signatures for everybody to approve, as well as, their address. We try and customize it to their shop, but it's still, a generic change order form. That would be the best way. In the event that you can't do that, try and get a text, try and get an email, try and get something that's written down. And that's where that picture comes from. But actually, I'll get into that. Seth, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, Lisa just asked a follow-up, but I think you just answered it. It said, do change orders need to be physically signed? Is an email okay? And I think you were saying that if it's reduced down to writing, that would be sufficient?
Yes. Okay. So do they need to be signed? Having a signature on them is the best way to do it, but having an indication of approval by whatever means is second best. Okay. So the litigation is not I try and make it as linear a process as I can, but there's a lot of very soft aspects of it. And so it's like, okay, you can't get somebody, the person, let's say that you've got a single owner and they're off in a completely different state, but they need you to change something and they're calling you to do it. Okay. Well, again, you don't have to have a signature, but go ahead and send them a text message while you're on the phone with them or send them an email before you touch anything. Okay. And get them to approve it. And once they say, yeah, go ahead, or I approve this, or yes, then I will take that back. And when I'm doing my discovery process, I will print that out to say, here is a change order. Because what it is somebody wants something done. They are offering to spend extra money on it or whatever it is that they're doing, basically in exchange of services for money. And then they're indicating their approval. That is a valid contract. That is a valid change order. Okay. Seth, questions?
Yeah. And I think you answered another one, but can you put something in a contract that says, any work under, let's say, $500 is not necessary to have a change order? Can you do that?
You can absolutely do that. You can put anything into a contract that two adults can agree to, but that's not going to keep them from suing you. That's not going to keep them from saying, okay, well, if it was a change requested, well, I didn't request this change, or I expected him to give me some sort of, give me like 3 choices before you just go ahead and spend $450 of my money. Because a lot of times, the property owner's situation will change. And when the property owner's situation changes, at the beginning, they were super flush with money. They had the ability to pay you. Next thing you know, COVID-19 hits, they lose their job. Now, when they were super flush with money, that's now grocery bills. Okay. That's light bill. They don't have anything incoming. So $450 or anything under $500 becomes material, but they wouldn't have they wouldn't go back to the contract. In my experience, and I hate to tell it to you, people don't go back to the contract until something happens. And by the time something happens, now you've executed on this thing using the authority that you had under the contract. Well, they're still going to drag you into court, which is going to cost you money, saying that, well, I didn't order this, or I thought that I'd be given some options, or I wanted to, pick the cheapest option and I wasn't given that opportunity. You just kind of want to head that off at the pass. Obviously, you can put it in your contract. I will definitely, put things in contracts that people ask for that are reasonable. That's a reasonable request. I can put that into a contract, no problem. Just understand that itself isn't going to prevent you from being sued. It's going to help set you up to win. But the thing that will kind of tip you over the edge into a higher likelihood of winning, I can't guarantee wins, obviously, I'm still a lawyer. But the thing that will tip you into a higher likelihood of winning is is having that person approve it in real time, okay? Which, text message, email, however you want to do it. So both work, but having them approve it in real time is definitely a better way to go. The other reason why you want to get text messages and emails is because, number one, people like to feel involved in the process, but number two, it's dirty, tricky, whatever the heck you want to call it. When somebody is absolutely raving about the absolutely wonderful job that you did, get that on paper. Because when they come back at the end and they say you did a terrible job on everything, you're like, no, 25% of the way through this project, you love the work that we did, okay? 50% of the way through this project, we invited you back on site. We walked the property with you. You loved it. You told us how awesome a job we were doing and how many other properties you wanted us to do. Get that in writing, because your affirmative defense, in case they sue you, is what's called waiver. And waiver, well, there's several affirmative defenses, but we'll just go with waiver for the moment. Waiver means that they had the opportunity to exercise a known right and they chose not to. So they have the right to fire you from the job if you're doing a bad job, but with them raving about the first 50% and how awesome a job that you did, it's like, okay, well, you can't complain about the first 50% when you saw it, you loved it, and you paid us for it.
Aaron, have you seen, even beyond texts and emails, have you ever seen anyone do a video? Like I've seen personal injury attorneys suggest that, and I've seen cases where basically the person would get out of the car and start talking about the accident, and you'd have them all on video, basically explaining the whole thing so they couldn't change their story. Would you suggest people take some videos of people, raving about the work?
So that one is a business decision. All right. So people are going to get real weird on camera when they realize that you're videotaping them. It's like, oh, well, why are you videotaping me? What is your purpose? Is there something that I don't know about? If you can do video, by all means, I'll use it. If it's valuable, I will absolutely 100% use it. But then there's still a likelihood of like, okay, well, what are you actually going to capture on video, and is that discoverable? So just you want to be careful about that one. Special note, in line with that question, is Texas is a one-party recording state, okay? I have had a contractor who had a particularly difficult client, and the client basically admitted that they did something to damage the actual structure of the property. It was one of the load-bearing walls that the contractor specifically told them, you need to not do this, because if you do, you're going to damage that wall, and when you do, a whole bunch of stuff is going to start shifting out of place, right? Well, the property owner did it. Sure enough, the load-bearing wall got damaged, things got shifted. It was going to require a whole bunch more money to fix all the other little parts, that come with, moving a load-bearing wall while there's a load on it. And so what my contractor did was he actually had an app on his phone that was recording the conversation. And he basically, called the client up and he was telling them about how there were they were discussing it. And on that phone call that was being recorded, the property owner admitted that it's like, yeah, you told me not to do it. We did it. It got damaged. I'm sorry. We'll do this, that, and the other. Okay. Now, that was a very contemporaneous thing where, it worked out. The owner did, apologize, paid for it, didn't blame the contractor. But what could have happened without that scenario is that the property owner could come back later and said, oh, well, you damaged this wall, right? Well, without that recording, then where would he have been? So am I saying go record all of your conversations? No. If you think that it would be a good idea to do that, Texas is a one-party recording state, and you do not have to let the other person know that you're recording them. So always speak to your history when you're speaking to your clients. You never know when that's going to show back up. All right. One of the other ones, and I absolutely love this, and my favorite people do this, not that you can't be one of my favorite people too, but a construction journal. Okay. So if you're running multiple crews and you've got, that person that's just your best guy, your super, your project manager, that he's going out and he's making sure that everybody on all your projects is doing what they need to be doing, I highly recommend a construction journal. Okay. I know that there are people out there who just buy a spiral and write in it and all that other wonderful stuff. That's great. But there is a such thing as a formal construction journal. I have sheets that I use and that I give to contractors if they want them, which is basically it's a single sheet of paper and it just has like a line item for date, the person filling out the journal entry, weather, if weather is a factor in your project. If you're doing all interior work, there's a likelihood that weather isn't going to be an issue. But if you're digging up a yard, if you've got to place, plumbing underground, heavy rain is going to be an issue. Okay, so every single day they note the weather. They note any permits that may need to be required or permits that were gained. They note the subcontractors that were on site. They note the materials that were delivered. They also note whether or not the owner was on site. That one's a big one because I have had some where the owner accused the contractor of not being on site every single day. And I've had some where the contractor accused the owner of never being there. Okay, so it's just like, was the owner on site? Snap a picture of them. There's also line items for like any potential problems that may have arose. Like, hey, we ran out of, our tools broke. I don't know. We had to go to Home Depot. It cost us, 2 or 3 hours. We're going to pick this up later. Any potential delays that would have come up just during that day. Were there any change orders? Even though change orders can be done on a separate thing, if the rest of your, sheet is light, just go ahead and write down the change order that was requested right there so that you have just a reminder that there was a change order requested. Again, some writing goes farther than no writing. The best writing is obviously formal writing, but if you're not going to do that, just make a note. And then, of course, my favorite, picture reminders. Your best guy, whenever they're going through their construction journal entry, is reminded to take pictures, okay? And since this is like an everyday thing, you've got a couple of pictures of the area that you're working on and the progress that's being made. So that can be used later. It shouldn't take too much time, but it might. So just keep that in mind. I see Seth coming back in with a question.
Well, I don't have a question yet, but I just wanted to remind you the time. I don't want to take up too much of it because we've gone over the 30 minutes, but
Yep.
I'll let you wrap up and we'll see
Gotcha.
if questions come through.
I think I've got 2 or 3 slides left, or 2 or 3 big slides left, but I'll see if I can roll through those real quick. Okay. Next slide. All right. So final walkthrough and punch list. Pictures. Again, with the pictures. The reason that you have punch list items is because someone has said that there is something that was not being done right or something that needs to be corrected. Take a picture of that thing as it currently stands, and then take a picture of it whenever you finish it, okay? That way they can't say, oh, well, this is busted, and then they left it busted. You've got a picture of it being, busted according to the customer, and then you've got a picture of it after you've taken care of it or resolved it on your punch list, okay? So just remember that your pictures tell your story. The less pictures you have, the less story you're able to tell, okay? Because once it turns into a lawsuit, it's all what I can prove. So, I'll put you on the stand and have you talk about it, but they're going to put themselves on the stand too. And you will have never heard such stories. It's going to be stuff that you didn't know existed. It happens all the time. Payments. Your final payment has to be inclusive of all change orders and discounts, or your final invoice has to be inclusive of all change orders and discounts. If you've been doing this beforehand, as each payment, as each invoice was issued, you were, giving discounts for stuff that you didn't do or, any change orders that were taken care of. If you were doing that contemporaneously, that's perfectly fine. But just remember that as of your final invoice, you need to have everything that you forgot to bill for earlier everything that you expected to bill for, and any discounts that you've given. And the reason why I do that, or the reason why I like that, or I like to see that, is because it's called a Rule 185 suit on sworn account. And what that means is that if you have everything kind of line itemed out as far as what you need to be paid for, usually we can end the lawsuit a little bit faster, which means that you get paid a little bit faster, which means that it costs you a little bit less. So just keep that line item detail there. All right. I promised y'all a bonus section. Here it is. The worst bonus section in the world. I'm terrible. It's lien deadlines. Lien deadlines are huge because if you miss them, you're out. Okay. Lien deadlines are basically steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you miss step number 1, you cannot do what's called perfecting your lien. And so when you can't perfect your lien, I can't sue to foreclose. I'm left with, breach of contract action, which are great, but then I can't take the property and sell the property. And you obviously want to be paid. If your property owner becomes judgment proof or your general contractor becomes judgment proof, I speak like I'm, representing subcontractors, but if somebody up the chain, if the person that was supposed to pay you becomes judgment proof and you don't have the property to execute on, you can pay me, but all you're going to get is a piece of paper that says that somebody owes you money. So there are two parts of a lawsuit. First part is winning, second part is collecting. Okay, so you got to pay attention to your lien deadlines. For residential, you have to have your lien filed by the 15th day of the third month after indebtedness accrues. For commercial, you have to have it filed by the 15th day of the fourth month after indebtedness accrues. And for retainage, you have to have you have 30 days to get a notice out of a retainage lien. Okay, all in the property code. Here's the rule of thumb. If you have issued an invoice and you have not been paid within 30 days, start moving towards a lien. Contact Level Set, because I believe that Level Set does pre-lien notices. I know for a fact that they do the liens themselves, but contact somebody like Level Set, contact an attorney, but make sure that you start moving towards that. The cost of the pre-lien notice and the lien requirement is minimal compared to the benefit that you would gain by making sure that you're preserving your interest in the property, okay, if you can. All right, next rule. In the property code, it says that, you have until this day to provide notice to this person and this day to provide notice to this person. Pay no attention to that. The reason why I say that is because if you are a third-tier subcontractor, what you need to be doing is you need to be providing notices of intent to lien to everybody in the chain above you. It costs you $4.10 per certified letter, okay? So if you've got 4 people above you, send 4 letters. It'll cost you $20 total, okay, plus the time it takes to write the letter. And what it does is it makes sure that there is no argument later. Okay, so there can be an argument if you're a third-tier sub. It's like, well, was this person required to be provided notice? And what day did you provide this notice? F it. Everyone that you send a notice to, send it to everybody. Make sure it's nice and polite because you're speaking to everyone and your history, but send it to everyone above you in the chain. Okay, all right. So last part. Do you see now why this timeline is important? Okay. Why everything as you're going. And as I'm building a case, what I will do is I will put in the records of payments, where the change orders are by date. I will attach my evidence to this timeline so that I can tell a judge and a jury, this is what happened. This is where things started to go wrong. This is where we weren't paid. This is where this change order was made, but nobody ever formalized it, and therefore we didn't do it. That's why this timeline is important and why everything that, I do kind of builds toward that timeline. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense now than it did in the beginning. Questions, comments, concerns?
I don't see any new questions, but I know a lot of times after one of these webinars, they kind of percolate up to the surface.
I mean, that could also mean that I was just really, really, really clear. I mean, I'm hoping for that one.
You were exceptionally clear and exceptionally thorough, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Most importantly, yours, Aaron, for giving us this opportunity this afternoon to host a webinar. So I wanted to thank you. If any other questions do come in, then you can post them on our Expert Center. Aaron can answer them from there, or you can ask Aaron directly. His information is up on the screen right now. Yes, these slides and this presentation will be made available afterwards. Again, my name is Seth Bloom. I'm the Senior Director of Attorney Services at LevelSet. And thank you so much, Aaron. We really appreciate it today. We hope for you to participate in more webinars. We want to see you out there answering questions. And I look forward to it.
Yep. And this is me in the flesh, guys. I know that, for the past 45 minutes, y'all have been staring at a PowerPoint presentation, but here I am.
I got to
awesome.
see.
And thank you, Seth. Thank you all for inviting me. I loved it.
Arlington, Texas, near
Greater
Dallas.
DFW.
There you go. All right, everyone have a nice day, and we'll look forward to our next webinar. Thanks so much.